Hey guys, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky. I've got Mush Khan with me today. So he has his own company, a manufacturing consultancy, but he is just incredibly knowledgeable about all things manufacturing. So we've got a great chat we're going to have about lots of different stuff. If you're into manufacturing, this is the show for you. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host, and I'm really happy to be joined today by Mush Khan. He is co-founder and CEO at Alchemy Industrial and just very knowledgeable about the whole world of manufacturing. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Welcome, Mush.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to our conversation as a follow-up to our first one a couple of weeks ago. This is going to be great.
Yeah, me too. I was just saying before we hopped on, our conversation a couple weeks ago could have been an episode itself. So this is going to be good.
Yeah, we're talking about, as we were joking about, besides our families, making stuff is a favorite subject to talk about.
Yeah.
So this is going to be great.
Well, and we'll get into all of that. Before we do, why don't you just tell the folks about who you are, where you came from, how you got doing what you're doing?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Jim. So I think the most notable thing is that I'm the son of a pipe fitter and of a seamstress. And so making stuff goes deep in our family and my family background. So I grew up watching, my dad go off to work as a so-called blue collar worker, which he did until his retirement about 50 years after he began. And actually I had the pleasure of working with him one summer as a pipe fitter's helper in an oil refinery. And then my mother was a seamstress for decades also. She sewed stuff to help the family ends meet. And I still can hear the sound of a Singer sewing machine going off in my head.
Yep.
In fact, I think as a kid, it probably scared me a little bit, that sound. But now as I look back, it was the sound of her making amazing things for people. And so those have been really informative experiences for me. And then in my career, it's always been something associated with the energy industry, manufacturing, distribution, product development, etc. And always serving industrial customers. I'm an engineer by degree, Jim, mechanical engineer. And throughout my career, I've been very lucky to work with people who make things every day. And in fact, I would say about 80% of the employees that have worked for me over the years and the people that I've worked with on my teams have been pipe fitters and welders and millwrights,
Yep.
carpenters, welders, truck drivers, machinists, people like that. And so I have a special place in my heart for them, primarily because of my experience with my family. And you and I were just chatting before we got on the call that I have two kids. One that's already graduated with a degree in aerospace engineering from Georgia
Very
Tech,
nice.
and then another one, my youngest, who is studying chemical engineering at LSU, which is where I went to school. And so,
Excellent. Yep.
we've got this making stuff and engineering theme very strong in our family. It's something
Yep.
that I love to do every single day. So most recently, just sort of continuing with background, me and a good friend of mine launched Alchemy Industrial. This was about 3 or 4 years ago. And the whole idea was really fed with this notion that we felt that America was on the verge of a massive industrial reshoring trend. And driven by 2 or 3 factors that I think are really playing out now. One of them is the rise in direct labor rates in China, and that continues to go up. In fact, I think a lot of the data says that it's actually higher. The direct labor rate is higher in China than in Mexico, which creates interesting dynamics for regional reshoring.
Yep. Sure.
And I saw this firsthand because one of the companies that I led had its contract manufacturing base in China. So I spent some time there. Really, really loved my time there and my time working with Chinese business leaders. And but I saw this trend of increasing labor rates. It was fascinating to see how quickly was happening as the Chinese middle class began to get built out, which I think is obviously very good for any country, including China. So that's sort of factor number one that led to forming Alchemy. Factor number two was that I thought that that manufacturing technologies like robotics, AI, machine learning, 3D printing, etc., were getting democratized. In other words, you didn't need to be a coding engineer to deploy these kinds of technologies. You could be an engineer like me, kind of a basic engineer that you could kind of figure out stuff, but
Yep.
all these technologies have become low code, no code types of technologies. And so those are getting implemented. The cost of these technologies have been coming down and will continue to come down. So that's factor number two. And then factor number three was that, I'm bullish on America. I'm an immigrant. I was born in England. My parents were born in India. They moved to the US for sort of good old-fashioned reasons, Jim, because they felt there was more opportunity here than anywhere else they'd been on the planet.
Yep.
And I agree with that. I've been to probably 25 plus countries. We're not perfect here, but gosh, there's no place like America. There really isn't. And
Yeah. Well
and
said.
so I think that this is the place where manufacturing is going to grow again in considerable ways. And so we wanted to be able to support that growth. So those are the three things that led us to forming Alchemy Industrial. Our specific area that we're working on is in the power industry, and even more specific to that is energy storage, power control systems, et cetera, that are helping to solve some of the power issues that are happening in the United States and will continue to happen. So that was probably a very long introduction, but that's
well, it's all good stuff though, and it gets after a lot of what we're gonna hit on as we go forward. The biggest one to me is that whole family story is just phenomenal. Your parents very blue collar, and now you an engineer, your kids engineers.
Sure.
My family is also immigrants. A little farther back, my great grandparents on my father's side from Poland, and my grandparents on my mother's side from Ireland, all coming from very humble beginnings. And I look at what I do and my siblings do, and I couldn't agree more as far as the opportunity that America has afforded us. And I've got two sons myself, one who's going into the trades. He just finished up a general building maintenance class, and he's looking at specializing in HVAC. The other one's junior in high school, and he's looking at going to college for software engineering. So
that's perfect. There's a funny
stuff.
South Park episode, Jim. I don't know if you watch South Park, but my oldest son does, and this episode is about the kids that have gone into the trades. So welders and carpenters and people like that, and they become the new sort of rich elite in America. And so they deliver the message of what we're talking about and what your son is doing so brilliantly that only South Park can do. And so and it's interesting because it's these kinds of things are very difficult to automate. AI is going to be very difficult to apply in plumbing. For example, if I go to your house and I crawl under your sink, well, there's no model for that. No one has developed a 3D model for what's actually under your sink, and and how a robot can fix it, etc. And so these are going to be very very difficult to automate types of activities. And so we need people who can make stuff every single day. And I think that your son's in a really good spot, and anyone that decides to learn how to make something, even as an engineer, I think, we need more engineers like the good old-fashioned 1960s engineers who actually built stuff.
Hands-on.
We need that because a lot of what we have to build has not been built before. And so it's such an exciting time. I couldn't be happier to sort of be in this spot, in this time, in this country.
Yeah, agreed. And I'll have to look up that South Park episode. I hadn't seen that one, but big fan.
I'll send it to you.
Please do. Excellent. First one to dive into that I want to hear your thoughts on is more about that reshoring and nearshoring. You talked a little bit about the drivers there, and then where do you see the opportunity and looking at obviously the change in direction with the new administration. How does that play into it?
Yeah, I think this is just like offshoring was a multi-decade trend, I think reshoring or nearshoring is another multi-decade trend. Certainly driven by a lot of factors, including geopolitics. We're seeing that play out in real time. I read a news story yesterday, Jim, about China putting restrictions on certain materials that go into chips and other
Yep.
products.
Yep.
And then the United States has restricted chip sales back to China, AI-driven chips. So these are, I think, the pawn moves on a broader chess game that is playing out, where I think there is a slow decoupling happening between many regions in terms of
Hmm.
manufacturing, perhaps even more broadly than that, including defense, et cetera, which is not my area, but America certainly seems to be more inwardly focused than it has been in a long time, and
Yeah.
and this is happening across multiple administrations, in my
Right.
view. This is not perhaps not even a Republican or Democrat thing. I think
Yep.
it's sort of a general thing. So there's geopolitics that's affecting it. I think we all experience as a country the impact of having important stuff made somewhere else during the pandemic.
Hmm.
And some of these things didn't make sense and don't make sense, and things like critical things like medicine or parts of our energy infrastructure or other things that we need every day. We just cannot be reliant on other places to make these things,
Right.
even if these other places are friendly to us, because
Right.
I think the nature of geopolitics is that all that can change, and so
For
um,
sure.
we don't want to do that. And then, I think finally, um, a country's wealth, I think, is largely dependent on its ability to make things, its ability to be self-sufficient. And America is very, very lucky that we have so many resources here, natural resources,
Hmm.
human capital, financial markets. I mean, heck, even the intracoastal waterway that allows us to ship products inexpensively all over the place. Most
Right.
countries don't have one of these things, and we have all of these things. And so wouldn't it be a shame if we were not more self-sufficient? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't interact with other countries or do trade with other countries. But I also think that this sort of the law of comparative advantage, where the cheapest place should make it, that has limits. And
Yes. Yep.
you know, I've joked around when I've done presentations before, when I've showed a picture of like a container ship off the coast of Long Beach with an arrow pointing to it, which is the thing you really need. It's stuck here.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so, if you're worried about that as a business, and most businesses are, you should be thinking about making more stuff here.
Yep. I find it really fascinating what you say about, that whole free trade thing. It's been a topic here. Had a guest on, geez, probably a couple of years ago now, Samuel Gregg, who's a scholar on all
Mhm.
things economic, but he is a big free trader, and I'm pretty closely aligned with him. And when I first got to know him, I thought he was pretty absolute. And in one setting, I was able to ask him what he thought about, some of these geopolitical ramifications, specifically with China. And his response was, "Well, we just need to stop doing stupid things."
That's always a good rule. Yeah, yeah. I probably violated that rule in life
I,
way too
I
many
think so,
times.
yeah. And you know, you've seen my posts on LinkedIn. I don't have patience, unfortunately, and it boggles my mind that we would have let things get to where they are now and
Yeah.
spent, you know, 40 years, 50 years now, um, shutting down our industrial base and sending our mining
Hmm.
offshore. So we've got all these resources and we've got all this know-how and good old American can-do attitude, and we've just been
Hmm.
stymieing it for so long. What's your take on being able to bounce back from that?
It's going to be a long journey, Jim. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Uh, so we can rally the capital to rebuild America's industrial base. It's going to take a lot of capital, trillions, perhaps $20 trillion plus, to do it in 2 to 3 decades to deploy that capital. But the rate limiting step is going to be human capital, and that's the
Yeah.
part that's really been hollowed out of the generations of making stuff elsewhere. that we don't have enough people who are interested in manufacturing. But now it's changing. Like the
Right.
story of your son is a wonderful story, and I'm very happy to hear that. But that's a story we have to change and continue to change, and to
Right.
be able to explain to people that making stuff is just as cool as coding something. In fact, making stuff today includes coding.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
Everywhere.
not, yeah, every system that we're making is electromechanical, uh, cyber, and so
Yep.
we have to address the issue of human capital. I think a lot of people are working on this, but I also think it's a cultural thing too, that
Yeah.
there's a certain group of people that we really would really thrive in manufacturing environments, and we really need those people. And as you and I were talking about earlier, that includes engineers who want to
Hmm.
who want to make stuff. So if you're working for Alchemy Industrial, for example, as an engineer, you are building something. Literally building something. And
Yep.
um, and so we've got to address the human capital issue to really succeed at this. I don't think there's an easy or quick way to do that.
Right.
Um, it's going to be a generational change. But, to your point, you said America is a can-do place. It certainly is.
Yeah.
And we will do this. I suspect in 10 to 20 years time, if you and I are having this conversation, we'll be celebrating America's industrial might once
Yep.
again, and we'll be specifically celebrating all the incredible people like your son who are making stuff every day.
Yeah. Yours too. I love what you said about how coding is ubiquitous. I also agree with you that we need to convey to especially our young people that manufacturing is cool and has great careers. So I launched a series just a few weeks ago of, my take on the old How It's Made program called Welcome to the Machine. And it's just showing
Love it.
how things are made. And I just had an episode today that is from my hometown in Ironwood, Michigan, way up north of here,
Hmm.
making the Stormy Cromer winter hat. Now, I've
Yeah.
known the people behind this literally my whole life,
Right.
and in talking to the former CEO, he was explaining how difficult it is to automate the making of the hat because it's such a complex sewing operation.
Hmm.
And then I put the video together, and they've got automated cutting for all the
Hmm.
very intricate little pieces. They've got automated sewing of the interior label. They've got automated um, embroidery of the
Hmm.
name on the ear flap. And so even an operation like that has a lot of coding involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it's absolutely true. You're not going to be in much of any capacity industry today and not come across pretty
Yes.
significant coding.
Well, it's really, I think that kind of automation is not it's not a job killer or threat. It doesn't threaten jobs. It's an
Right.
enabler. We literally can't make all the things the world needs
Yep.
without automation. One of the statistics that I've shared before, Jim, has been that if you look at the world, there's several hundred million people, maybe up to 1 billion people, that still use biofuels, like burning wood for fuel, for example,
Yeah.
or cooking, etc. And imagine 300 million people. Okay, let's say 300 million people, which is probably one third the number of people that are not sort of engaged in the modern economy. Imagine 300 million people now wanting light bulbs and washing machines and bicycles,
Right.
etc. That's an
Yep.
entire United States worth of demand out
Yep.
there, and so unless we understand how to deploy the newest technology in manufacturing, given the fact that we don't have enough humans that can make things, then we won't serve these new customers that are going to come on board in the next 10 to 20 to 30 years. So things
Mhm.
like automation, whether it's automated embroidery or automated cutting or sewing, etc., that we've got to learn how to embrace that, not resist it. And we need a lot of young people that really want to dig into that, and hopefully they'll learn to love using the technology, because there's a whole world of people out there that need amazing things, and we can build it here in America for them.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and, we talk quite a bit on this show about the workforce challenge, and that's another element that just says we have to have automation is baby
Right.
boomers are retiring, we have neither the numbers nor the skills to replace them, so
Sure.
how do you do that? You automate the dark, dirty, dangerous jobs and
Yeah.
upskill the workforce we have.
Yeah, and I think there's a really interesting business opportunity, probably multiple business opportunities around taking that tribal knowledge
Oh
that the
yeah.
baby boomers have in their heads, after decades of experience, and figuring out how to I hate this word, but institutionalize it.
Yeah.
To say, okay, like my dad who knew how to work with every conceivable type of pipe material in the world, and he knew how to make joints that were good, secure, always 90 degrees, never off even half a degree. That's a lot of wisdom and experience
Sure.
that
Yeah.
is in the heads of people that are sadly leaving the workforce. And so
Right.
I think that's one of multiple business opportunities that exist, just in the area of human capital. Forget all the other parts of manufacturing.
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
I think there's dozens of new business models that can be created, hundreds or even thousands of companies, big companies that can be created in this opportunity. So, there's no shortage of wealth generating opportunities and options today.
Right. Yep. Another thing I wanted to drill in more is the geopolitical situation. So we've talked about China a good bit, but the world's obviously a
Mhm.
lot bigger. Give me your perspective on how things are playing out broadly in international trade and where you see those heading,
Yeah.
especially focused obviously on manufacturing.
Yeah, sure. I think that, as I mentioned, there's some decoupling happening around the world right now. There's a lot of embedded risk in supply chains. We experienced some of this, as we mentioned, during COVID, but there's more of it out there. I don't, humans aren't always great at sort of quantifying risk in their own lives until it
Right.
happens, and so if you don't have a spare tire in your car and you get a flat, then you realize, oh, I really needed a spare tire. But while you're driving around, you don't realize you need a spare tire. So I think that's that risk is there. You just have to read the news every day to see the number of conflicts around the world, whether it's sort of soft conflicts related to China, whether
Mhm.
or Russia, Ukraine, or the Middle East.
Yep.
The world is a very dynamic place right now, and perhaps will get even more risky over time. So, it's certainly that's sort of above my pay grade in so many different ways.
Right.
But I do know that if I'm building a company that builds products that people rely on, I want to control as much of it as I can, because that risk is there, because geopolitics will be geopolitics always.
Yep. One thing that isn't above your pay grade is the specific things that are hamstringing manufacturing, and especially not just America, but really the whole Western world. What I've seen is, again, decades of, in many cases, well-meaning regulations and
Mhm.
stipulations that have really kind of taken the legs out from under manufacturing. Where do you see
Sure.
that headed more broadly across the Western world?
It's certainly, I think it's a drag on any business. There has to be some regulation of what we all do. That's obviously important. And that does create positive change for society. Every now and then, society makes fundamental decisions about what it accepts and doesn't accept. For example, in the West, we no longer accept child labor. We don't want to send kids into mines or in other
Right,
places
right.
doing stuff. So that's a non-monetary decision. That's a societal decision. We also
Yep.
made decisions about keeping our environment clean, about safety, etc. So those things, I think we've got to stick with them. But outside of that, there's very little that's rational about regulations, and you spend
Mhm.
a lot of time like ducking and weaving and trying to figure out, okay, how do I stay out of trouble while actually trying to make something? And most CEOs don't want to expose themselves to perhaps personal liability in violating something.
Sure.
And I think
Yep.
there's ways you can manage it, of course, but it does seem like we have a lot of regulatory layers heaped upon us. And I'm certainly a proponent of what I hope will happen in the next few years, of sort of untangling some of those regulations, and at least asking, does this make sense? Who does this help? Does this really improve safety? Does it really, help clean the environment? etc.? Does it really
Mhm.
protect someone? And those answers are usually pretty obvious. And if I had to pick a number, this is a total guess, Jim, but I would imagine that at least 50% of the current regulatory framework doesn't add value to society.
Yeah.
I think I'm
Yep.
being generous.
No, I I would definitely go higher than that, but as I said, probably an outlier in my perspective.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah.
Digging in a little deeper, I've focused quite a bit on Germany because I had an article early this year about, Germany being the canary in the coal mine with
Sure.
some of their moves, specifically in the energy front, and now you see an accelerating deindustrialization happening there. Just, this week or last week, the announcement by
Hmm.
ThyssenKrupp that they're cutting 11,000 jobs, VW pulling plants from Germany for the first time ever. Um, my personal take is I agree with you, from the US perspective, is that we've got some potential tailwinds now, with the change in party control, but I don't wanna see our Western allies struggle. I think we as an alliance are the strongest when we're all economically sound and we all have industrial might. So what does that take to turn around?
Oh goodness, Germany. Gosh, I hope it's not a cautionary tale, Jim. It looks like that's what it is as we're sitting here today. It does show you that you can get to the point where you've degraded your industrial capacity so much that you can no longer prime the pump and get things going. There's no means to prime the pump. I hope that's not true with Germany. Culturally, it's a country that knows how to build incredible things, and you're right. We should have, I think, active partnerships with countries that have industrial capacity and figure out how to work well with them. And I think that should happen naturally, of course, but we do need other countries around the world working with us. They should not be adversarial in any way,
Right. Yep.
because whether they're part of the supply base or even markets, and certainly, there's a lot of smart people around the world. So we need to think about intellectual capital in an international way too.
Mhm.
Again, as long as those countries are not adversarial with the United States.
Right. Yep. Okay, so I've been asking the questions. You've gotta have some things on your mind that I'm not getting to, so what are those?
Well, I think obviously I'm a big fan of manufacturing. I'm also curious about what you see in terms of the state of manufacturing entrepreneurship in
Mm.
this country. Do you see that as a sort of a building force? Is it still sort of latent? What's your views on that, Jim?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of strength there, kind of underlying things. Small and medium businesses remain 80% plus of
Hmm.
the number of manufacturing companies we have in the US. What I think has been the challenge is this consolidation and centralization, of control, of power,
Hmm.
that just makes it more and more difficult for those things to thrive, to survive even. Um, One of the big reasons I want deregulation is not just to build our manufacturing base back, but also to, allow those newcomers and those innovators the room to build and grow. And I just
Hmm.
think it's one of the downsides of the situation we've gotten ourselves into is there's this, um, state and corporate alliance right now that has made it very difficult for those folks who are just critical to what we
Yeah.
do as a manufacturing power. So
Yeah.
I am hoping that there's radical deregulation coming from the new administration that will help the existing small guys to do much better and to inspire the young people we've talked about to take the entrepreneurial
Hmm.
plunge.
Yeah, such a good point. I mean, you're right. 80% of our manufacturing supply chain is sort of that long tail of small to mid-sized companies. And I think the added challenge on top of heavy regulation is that it's hard for let's say if you're a machine shop owner and you've got 20 machinists working for you, or 10, you've got 8 or 10, CNC machine tools in your shop. That person is totally busy trying to keep the wheels on the bus, making
Right.
payroll, talking to customers, dealing with product jobs that might be late, or something, a mill goes down or whatever.
Hmm.
There's an added challenge of that person taking on some of this new technology that's available to them.
Yep.
So we walked up to that machine shop owner and say, "Hey, you really need to be using AI in your machine shop." I mean, you're probably going to get a blank stare because
Right.
100% of that person's time is making payroll, and so I think that also speaks to additional business opportunities for
Yeah.
entrepreneurs to figure out how do you make solutions that are available, uh, so simple that that 10-person machine shop owner can use them, not because he's dumb, because he's so damn busy doing other things. These
Yep.
solutions have to be productized, they have to be inexpensive, et cetera. And so I think that can also help with sort of creating more entrepreneurship and addressing
Yeah.
the long tail of manufacturing.
Yep. One thing I have seen, kind of this combination of my Forbes work that kind of opens up things for me to see that I wouldn't ordinarily see from my vantage point. Because one person in manufacturing touches this tiniest little sliver of everything out there, but because I'm writing broadly, I get to see segments of manufacturing I've never personally been involved in. And you mentioned machine shops. Another one is the garment industry, textiles. I really see strong networks there of people trying to find the solutions. And then
Mm-hmm.
um, software is a whole thing that's just really inspiring right now. There are so many
Hmm.
small companies offering solutions that are tailor made. There's things specifically tailored for machine shops,
Hmm.
add-ons um, for ERPs that already exist. So I
Sure.
think, like you said, the next 10 to 20 years, we revisit the conversation and the industrial base will have recovered and grown. I think we're going to see the same thing when it comes to those software and automation tools, also just taking this
Yeah.
substantial leap forward.
Yeah, I agree. It's an exciting time, Jim.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of the new world over and over and over again.
Yep.
And people like us and so many other people that we know are living it and driving things forward. I'm proud to be part of the manufacturing community in America. And you're
Yep.
right, it is a network of people. I'll share this one sort of final story with you. When I was a
Okay.
baby engineer about 100 years ago, um, my first job was as a reliability engineer working on pumps and compressors. So stuff that stuff that spins or went back and forth that broke. And my job was to try to help fix it.
Yep.
And every year I went to the Texas A&M Pump Symposium in Houston. I think it's called something like that now. Maybe it's different, but I remember when I would go there, I'd meet an engineer from Exxon or from Amoco or from BP or whatever, and that person had the same seal problem on an API pump that I did. And so we were able to talk to each other on the phone. This is even pre-email, tells you how old I
Right.
am. But
I hear you.
talk to each other on the phone, and I could ask him, "Hey, I got the same pump. It's in this similar service. How did you deal with it?" And
Yep.
I think that we have to embrace this sort of network again, and realize that this is a time for incredible cooperation and not competition within the United States. And
Yep.
so work that you're doing and podcasts like this and many others, I think are part of that network building effect that's happening. And
Yep.
I hope to see a lot more of it. And I can tell you, I would gladly help any manufacturer that reaches out to me. If I can help them, if I have the knowledge or experience to help them, I won't always, but I'd be happy to help anyone that needs help.
Good deal. Yeah, and we'll have a link to Alchemy Industrial in the show description. So
Perfect.
anyone who needs a hand, reach out to them, and Mush is
Yeah.
there to give you an assist.
Yeah.
I just love it. I couldn't agree more. I think, um, people have trade secrets, but they don't have as many trade secrets as I think they want to
No, they
believe.
don't.
And
Yeah.
and it's another thing I'm challenging manufacturers on is to open your doors as much as you can.
Sure.
Um, Working with your competitors isn't necessarily going to kill your business, but
Right.
us being in our own little enclaves could kill our
Sure.
industry. So,
Especially
yeah,
if you're part of that long tail, that 80% that you've described.
Yep.
You can't do it on your own. Alchemy is still a small company. We hope in a few years' time we'll be a big company, but we rely on a network of people to help us. And I talk to battery people all the time to help me, even though we might be on the surface competitors. But
Yep. Yep.
we're part of a very small community of Americans trying to build batteries, and so we're not really competing.
Right.
We have to help each other out. And the same is true of a machine shop or a garment manufacturer or cut and sew operation or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
So
Well
yeah,
said.
we're all in it together.
Yep. Perfect. Well, Mush, it was wonderful having you on today. This was incredibly informative.
Likewise. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate the time, and let's go build an incredibly new country together. We get to do it as a family and as a community. I can't
Love
wait.
it. Yep. And of course, yeah, that goes for all of you guys out there. Thank you for being here. You are why we're here, and we're here every Tuesday with interviews. And now Wednesdays and Thursdays, we'll usually have one of the Welcome to the Machine videos showing you how stuff is made. So hop on there, tune in. We'll have more very informative people like Mush. I can't promise they're all going to be as informative, but they're all going to be at least a little informative. So from Manufacturing Talks, I'm Jim Vanoski signing off. So long.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vanoski. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.